our slides with you. Do you see the slide deck? Great, awesome. And then here is a link to the slides. We just put that in the chat as well. So thank you so much for coming. It's really nice to see so many folks in the conversation this afternoon. My name is Allison Clemens, and I'm a member of the Archival Workers Emergency Fund Organizing Committee. And we're going to be talking this afternoon, really hosting just a conversation with you all about labor in pandemic times. So yeah, Carity, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Cara DeSimone, often Carity. I'm a new professional and also a contingent worker. So I'm down here in Tallahassee on a one-year contract. So I'm really feeling that precarity, and just thrilled to be here and able to talk about the work that we've done with the Off Fund.
Yeah, thank you. I should have said too, my name is Allison Clemens and I'm an archivist at Yale. So I'm here in my home in North Haven, Connecticut. So, and if you see me looking over here, it's just because my slides are, the slides are up on the screen. So I'm sorry if that's a little distracting. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and kick things off. So we really wanted to join you all today for an informal conversation, and we'll start off by just talking a little bit about the fund itself before we sort of kick into gear with the conversation. So I'll hand it over to Carity to talk a little bit about that.
So AWEF started about a year ago, just about exactly. And this program kind of arose out of, it was a mutual aid effort. And with such a tenuous labor situation already, COVID hit especially hard to all of the arts. And so we came together, this wonderful group of people, to try and do something to help. And today we're going to kind of talk about both the impact of COVID and also the larger issues within our professional labor. And so we hope that after today, you will feel empowered to talk freely about archival labor issues with anyone. And if you are able to, in any way, assist, you may refer colleagues who may be in need, or if you yourself are still in need, please apply for a grant. We still have grant availability at this time through June.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. Okay, so we wanted to talk a little bit about norms for the conversation. Let's see. So I believe, are we being recorded right now? Yes, we're being recorded right now. But our goal is that during the most of the conversation piece, we're going to pause the recording. So we just want everyone to be aware of, privacy concerns. So when we're in kind of like this main room, the conversation will be recorded, but we'll pause that when we're sort of having smaller group discussions. And so our hope in doing that is that everyone should feel empowered to communicate in this open forum. So really, we feel that your perspectives and opinions are valuable and really necessary. I think it's funny because since this is an open forum, we don't want anyone to feel obligated to speak, but to be frank, the success of this session really depends on your participation. So we ask that you please, if you have something to contribute, to please do so. And part of that too is also being sure that we're all making space for other people to speak as well, that we're all practicing active listening, and that we're all really respecting our colleagues. And being mindful of the amount of space that we're taking up and ensuring that everyone's able to speak and share. So, again, most, or not most, but like sort of the central parts of the session are being recorded in this main room. But the sort of private conversations that we'll go into momentarily, the smaller conversations that we'll go into in a little bit are not going to be recorded. So please do consider the privacy of others and yourself and your institutions, and don't share identifying information that others may have shared with you in the smaller conversations in this main recorded room. And yeah, once we enter the conversation, you're free to use the chat, call stack in the chat, which just means like typing the word stack into the chat to say that you want to speak, or to raise your hand physically or virtually to indicate your desire to speak. So we've tried to allow for a few different opportunities for people to participate. Okay. Great. So yeah, just a little bit more about the off fund background for folks who maybe don't know as much about it. So as I think Carity mentioned, it was formed in March 2020, and it's been a really amazing collective and collaborative effort since then. But I do want to acknowledge that sort of the impetus in the beginning of the fund was started by Jessica Chappell, who I think I saw come into the room just a moment ago, and Lydia Tang. So thank you, very much to the two of them for their leadership and really getting us off the ground. Again, it's been a collective and shared effort since then, but I do want to acknowledge the really important steps that they took to get us started. And really what we've been doing since March 2020 in the organizing committee is to organize aid for workers experiencing financial hardship due to COVID-19. We worked with the Society of American Archivists Foundation to establish the off fund with $15,000 of seed funding in April 2020. So we're actually in the midst right now of doing an off fund 1 year birthday fundraising campaign. So you might see some messaging about that. We're very excited about it. Yeah. Let's see, and in addition to the appreciation that I expressed for Lydia and Jessica, I just wanted to shout out to our other organizing committee colleagues, past and present. So their names are up on the slide, and really, big thanks to them for their really excellent work in enabling the fund and also creating spaces for conversations together. Something that I don't think that we've talked about so far in this presentation, but I think that we'll mention a little bit later, is that we have been doing a series of panels for the fund. Some of you may have attended those. Yeah, I think that it's just really sparked some great conversations about labor in libraries, archives, and museums. I'll hand it over to you, Carity, for a little bit more about the fund.
As Allison mentioned, we were started with $15,000 of seed funding, and early on, we had a lot of discussion around how we were going to make sure that it was an equitable system, or how are we going to approve grants? What are the requirements that we're looking for, and able to help the most amount of people, but also to do so responsibly. And we decided that the grants would be $1,000 and less if people requested less. And SAA membership was not a requirement, because that is sometimes a financial hurdle. And as of last week, I don't think we've had any additions since then, but as of last week, we've supported 175 archival workers in need. And that's just, it's really, I'm so proud to be able to have helped that many people. Over the past year, we have received 830 donors have donated $84,000. We've also had a number of institutional and corporate donors as well, but we wanted to make sure that small donations were still basically every little bit counts. And in a second, I'll show you this great infographic, and it made my day to put all this data together. So the small donations we actually put up through the Coffee for Colleagues campaign. And it's based on this thought that, if we were not having this pandemic and the quarantine type of world, that, if you knew that your coworker was struggling, you'd maybe take them out for a cup of coffee and just to be there and sort of support them and say, hey, I know you're having a tough time. Let me take this little burden off of your back. Let's hang out. Let's make you feel better. And that's really what the Coffee for Colleagues was, and tea for me, because not everybody is a coffee person. I am. But we wanted to make sure that smaller donations were not lost. And Allison, if you'll click over real quick, on the next slide, you'll see the majority of our funds were donated by individual donors. And that just, again, when I was pulling together this data, I was just in shock and awe. We've, again, 175 grants have been funded. We've collected $146,000. That's just amazing to have come from 15 of the seed funding, and to have grown that by so much. It still just kind of amazes me. and I just want to check my notes real quick. The 30,000 came from regional and partner organizations, and we've had 12,100 donations that came from either SAA travel funds or section funds that have been rolled over. So those were internal from SAA, but they were also done by choice. And we just really wanted to highlight that, like, this is kind of the big power of small donations that we were able to achieve. The average individual donation was only $100, and to blow that up so well, I'm so proud of everyone who's been able to help us. And if you'll click over to the next one. Right now, we are working on, again, the birthday week fundraising. We have this wonderful campaign, April 8th, which I will always remember because it's also my birthday. April 8th is the day that the SAA Foundation announced that they would be funding the Awe Fund. So we're ready to celebrate. It's been a good year for, well, a good year for making this work. We are working on a little bit more of some data analysis for our survey. We had a summer survey and a winter survey. And we're going to be taking that fold into a 2020 annual report. And as I mentioned earlier, we're still accepting applications for grants through June. And we're in discussions to see what the future of Awe Fund will be like after June, whether or not we're going to be able to kind of rescope and continue assisting contingent workers in the similar capacity, or if, we're going to say, well, this was kind of a special COVID only and just kind of wrap up as we can. And as Allison mentioned, we do have some events, some Q&A sessions coming up. So if you are interested in, oh yes, and Allison's putting in links in the chat. Thank you so much. I had talked about that, but I don't have the dual screen, so thank you. If you're interested in any of the Q&A sessions, we do have a self-nomination link, which is at the end of our slides. And I believe that brings us to our discussion portion right about on time.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe what we could do too. So, at this point, it's still very exciting to us, but I think it's probably fair to say that Awe Fund stuff is like, we could kind of talk about it in our sleep. We've heard about it, or we know just a lot about it. There's a lot going on. It might be new information for some of you. And so I wonder if maybe we could take just like 5 minutes in this room to answer any questions specifically that people have about the Awe Fund, and then we can go really into like the panel discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording now, and then we'll start it again once we come back into the main room for the recap. Okay, and I think that we're recording again. So yeah, who would like to talk a little bit about some of the themes that came up in the rooms? We don't have a sort of design for how this portion will go. We just wanted an opportunity to kind of like reconvene and talk as a group.
I'm just going to jump in real quick and say, I think we did assign rooms randomly, but almost everyone in our room ended up being in this new professional contingent, terrifying position. So it was a really great conversation. And I'd love to hear what you guys talked about in the other room.
Yeah, I can start us off, and then if folks want to jump in, I think we were room 1 maybe. If other folks from room 1 want to jump in. We talked about a lot of different things. We talked about unionization efforts in a few different contexts, and how that can be pretty long and protracted struggle to unionize. So we talked about that at some length. We talked about more about the Awe Fund too, and the relationship between the Awe Fund and the Society of American Archivists. We talked about efforts to kind of center practices of mutual aid and more expansive notions of, I guess, membership and belonging as archival workers in SAA specifically. We talked about, actually we closed with a really great comment about the power and potential of regional organizations like NEA to advocate for change in labor practices too. So our conversation was pretty wide ranging, but as I mentioned to the folks in the group, like I was amazed, like it felt like it went really, really quickly. So it was a really thought-provoking and good conversation. But yeah, other folks who are in room one, anything to add to that? Maybe then I'll present a question to the group. I'm curious to hear what others think about this. So I know in my view, having conversations like this in communities, even when they're online, is valuable in and of itself. So I think that this conversation was valuable regardless of, what happens after it. But I do wonder, are there other conversations or other like venues for community building and organizing that you all wish existed that, you haven't observed yet and that you can maybe imagine that you might want to share about?
So I'm on the steering committee. Oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Did anyone else? Is anyone okay? Just jumping in. So I'm on the steering committee for the SAA issues and advocacy section. And something that we've been talking about a lot is, what would a national union of archival workers look like? How would that work? Because maybe your workplace can't necessarily unionize, or you're a lone arranger, or something. But what would it look like to have, and what's possible for a national labor advocacy organization for people who do the kind of work that we do? And we haven't really found any answers. Definitely, it's still like a fact-finding and discussing situation, and COVID has gotten in the way. But there's certainly something where like we're looking at these same issues, and trying to figure out like what infrastructure can we build for archivists from a labor standpoint, so that we don't have to resort to, like I think mutual aid should be for emergencies, but it's like when everything is an emergency because there's no infrastructure, that's a problem. Kind of like how GoFundMe has become a healthcare organization, basically. So how do we make sure that the off fund doesn't have to be doing the work and compensation that institutions are doing? So that's my hope for the future.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Jenna. Other sort of like future possibilities that folks are imagining?
Miles has something to say.
Hi, thanks. So I was just cleaning up my office a little bit yesterday, and I came across some books from my master's degree program. And I was looking at one. I said, should I keep it or should I toss it, give it away? And I just looked at the table of contents, and there was a chapter on the professional, how you become a professional. And I don't remember reading it before, but it's been a while. But I looked at this chart and I said, this is so, this is another world. This is not how most lives work. That this is the steps that you have to take to become an accomplished archivist. And I just think sometimes it's using new words and new ways to describe reality. And so I'm starting to embrace archival worker. It's taking me a while to embrace the concept that I'm just another bozo on the bus trying to make a living. Archival worker is plenty good for me right now in my life. But there was such resistance to thinking of it that way, because I was going to become a so-called professional, right? And so I think that's part of the building community, is sharing words and ways of thinking about it and seeing it that are more reality-based, than kind of this, glossy, this is how you become an archivist. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Joan, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. And just to piggyback off of what Miles was saying, some of the, I think, personal growth work. I'm trying to think of therapist words, and it's Friday, y'all. I can't think of any. But like some of that work that I think that we do, we get into this profession in a lot of ways because it's special. We get to touch old stuff. We get to know things. We get to, be stewards of history. And there are these very lofty sort of ideals, I think, that come along with being an archivist in a lot of ways. And it's been how many years since vocational awe was coined? Like at least since I think I've been in the profession for 10 years now. So some time in there. And this, like you were saying, Miles, that fight against, I am a professional, but like, what about everyone else I work with? What about, when you work in a library system where some people are paraprofessional or, and that's what they're called. And it creates this hierarchy where like, it makes it seem like you are in your position better or special, and I think it serves to stop us from actually supporting each other in creating something more equitable for all of us in pursuit of doing this job that is just a job that we shouldn't be doing after work and after hours and for as little pay as we do. And so yeah, so I think, I don't know, that's something to keep in mind. And I'm really interested to see the Inclusion and Diversity Committee is doing the contingent employment survey round 2. And my gut feeling, I know this is being recorded, but my gut feeling is that it's not going to be that different than round 1. It might be even worse than round 1 in terms of like how many people are experiencing contingent archival work and for how long. And I'm curious to see what NEA as our professional association does with that and what happens next. Is it sort of like we have this information and then here we have this information, we have this data, or what can we do as a professional organization of volunteers to advocate with that data or to create some change? My other thought there is that I'm really excited that there are finally salary ranges on job postings. And I would be curious to see, I feel like it disappeared at the beginning of COVID, but groups were putting up, workers were putting up how much they were making in different positions around the country, first in museums and then archives. We jumped in at some point. And I feel like that, I haven't seen that since last year. Yeah, and I'm curious. Anyway, those are my disjointed Friday afternoon thoughts. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And a couple of us put a link to the survey in the chat too. So I would encourage everyone. I believe it's anyone who has held a contingent position in the past, regardless of where it is, but currently works in New England, or current contingent workers in New England are eligible to complete the survey.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on the task force for it, and it's exactly that. And we're looking at like the past 10 years. So either, in the past 10 years have been contingently employed in New England, or you were contingently employed elsewhere in the US and now you reside or work in New England. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you so much for the really important work that you're doing on the survey too. So we've got just another couple minutes, so I think we'll hand it to Samuel for the last comment.
Okay, this just carrying on the train that Miles and Joan started. The word that comes to mind for me is it's throughout this conversation is just solidarity in the conception that you don't understand ourselves as archival workers, and talking about the separation of, oh, I'm professional, I have my MLS, I'm on this side of this line, whereas the paras, I'm the first professional archivist that my institution has hired, and the people before me were self-taught nuns from that order who did a tremendous job, but because they didn't have the MLS after their name, there's no, I have to prevent myself from building up that line between us. No, they were doing exactly the kind of work that I need to do, but I need to consider myself on the same level as they are, not better, or because they have those very expensive letters. And in the same sense, whether, where we have to understand the different circumstances, but especially that really jumped out at me and our breakout is how much of in a similar situation we all are. And it's just having that conversation is incredibly important to understand that and build that common sense of solidarity, but between us moving forward in these sorts of surveys and sorts of tools. I think it's, as I'm hearing more and more about them, again, just discussing them, it feel more and more and more important, and almost a tiny little bit optimistic, tiny bit, but we'll see.
Yeah, thank you for that. Carity, is there anything that we want to say in closing?
I got nothing. It was just such a great conversation with everyone.
Yeah,
See
we
that
really
these themes go, it's more than just the off fund, or it's more than just our group. This is an archival community issue.
Yeah, one more thing to mention too is that Carity and I are hoping to put together a blog post for the Offline blog in the next 2 weeks with some general reflections about this session. So if you're interested in contributing to that, or if you would like to take the lead in writing it, please do reach out. And I just put my email address in the chat too. But if you Google me too, I'm pretty easily Googleable. But yeah, thank you all so much. It's been a really extraordinary pleasure to get to talk with you. And really appreciate the perspectives and generosity that you've shared this afternoon. So I think that we've got 15 minutes before our next session, so everybody should be able to have a nice break. But hopefully we'll see you around in the rest of the conference. Bye, take care. Thank you.